Hello and welcome to Transplants Take on Sport. My name's Lewis Daniels, and for the first time ever, I'm joined by not one, not two, but three guests. They are kidney transplant recipient and chairman of the England Transplant Football Club, Steve Woodrow, development officer for the Liverpool County Football Association, Mark Horlick, and development officer for the Cheshire Football Association, Dan Landstrom. They'll be telling you about the newly launched England Transplant Football Club, how you can get involved with it, and their plans for the future, so make sure you check out the website and the show notes to keep up to date. We had a few technical difficulties during the recording, but I'm delighted to be able to bring this episode to you. If you're enjoying the podcast, please make sure you press subscribe or follow wherever you normally listen so you don't miss an episode. It's an England Transplant Football Club special today. Please welcome to Transplants Take on Sport, the chairman of England Transplant Football Club, Steve Woodrow, and FA development advisors for the club, Mark Horlick and Dan Landstrom, and hello to everybody listening on the Natter podcast. If you're not sure what the Natter podcast is and you haven't heard about it yet, don't worry, all will become very, very clear soon. It's a new podcast in association with the England Transplant Football Club that will be presented by myself and Stephen Harrison, who long-time listeners will know, as he was the first guest on Transplants Take on Sport. So if you'd like to keep up to date, you can go and follow the Natter podcast on social media. All the links will be in the show notes of this podcast. Now, it's a slightly different episode today. It's a bit shorter than usual, and it's going to be quite informative, but there are some exciting opportunities for you to get involved with potentially in the very near future. So to start with, Steve, what made you start the England Transplant Football Club, and what did the process of setting up the team involve?
Hi, Lewis. It was a natural progression, really, from starting Liverpool Transplant Football Club up. There was no governing body or organisation out there that provided regular access for all transplant patients to get back into football. So the results of the Liverpool Transplant Squad were there to see, with increased physical fitness and improvements in mental health and integration back into the community and helping the medical conditions, really. So, the next steps was ensuring we could help roll this out nationally and getting the right people in to help so that we could get access to coaching and more clubs with the FA and Pan Disability Leagues.
And Mark, you've been involved from the start as well with Steve. We're talking off camera. What's your role been in starting the club up and setting it up?
So really, my role was just basically to give the lads an opportunity to play football. I'm a big believer if everyone's given an opportunity that everyone will succeed in that sport or area of work. And basically we just wanted to make sure that the lads could have an opportunity to play football, get fit and obviously get back into society.
And Dan, could you explain a bit more about the England Transplant Football Club pathway?
Yeah, I can do, yeah. Obviously I'm new to this area of work really and just learning as I go along. But hopefully I can bring a little bit of expertise to the development of the club and the pathway, just from my general football development experience, similar to Mark. So Steve and I, we went to visit. We went right to the top. We went to St George's Park and met with Jeff Davis at the FA, just around what steps to go through and was there any possibility of having a national team or national transplant team. So I think it was a positive meeting. We come away with loads of different ideas, and I put together a proposal then really about how we could potentially develop the game and have an impairment-specific pathway for players, regardless of their ability. So we're not trying to reinvent the wheel, and we're probably sort of copying what happens in other impairment groups. So if you look at like the cerebral palsy pathway, we're trying to follow that sort of model. So trying to create a wide base of players that we can select from, and trying to create teams, in different regions around the country. So that's well underway. So it's trying to raise that awareness around the country, get more clubs, get more people playing, and then from there having sort of, regional or national competition with the aim of feeding them talented players into a national team that can go and play international fixtures. But I suppose like what's happening in Liverpool, with the Liverpool Transplant FC playing in their Ability Counts League, that's what we'd be looking for around the country. So hopefully that answers your question a little bit.
It certainly does, and I know there'll be a lot of people who are big into their football and play a lot of football with a transplant listening to this. I myself am part of one of those teams. I'm in the Nottingham team, and trials for the England Transplant Football team are coming up very, very soon. Mark, when are they taking place, and how can people register to get involved?
So the trials are taking place on Sunday, the 20th of March, 2 p.m. at our new facility, LCFA Sefton. We're very privileged, to be honest, to host these events. Brand new 3G facility, and obviously something on the scale of this is going to be brilliant to attract, hopefully, I'd say the next generation of Transplant England players, really the first generation of Transplant England players, and that's what we're pushing for. I think the whole thing with the England setup might just encourage those transplant patients or those who have had transplants to actually give the game a go as well.
The name England Transplant Football Team, I think, gives people a wow factor. And I know that there's another trial coming up as well that I'll be going to. The venue of that, I know the Liverpool one is an amazing venue. The venue of the second trial, I think, will massively prick people's ears up. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, it's going to be held at St George's Park. We're just in negotiations now with the site to try and get a pitch, 3G or grass. But as you say, I think the whole order of St George's Park will be that extra string of motivation. And listen, if those people want to come along, and yeah, if you get picked for the England side, that's great. But there's going to be a development squad and basically other opportunities to represent your local area or hopefully your local team.
At the time of recording, the date of that trial, I believe, is unconfirmed, but the link to the England Transplant Football Club website will be in the show notes. So make sure you go and check that out, and you can keep up to date with what's going on when that trial may be. The Liverpool trial, that is, at the time of release, that is this week. So if you'd like to register for that, go, get involved, and I'm sure these guys would love to see you there. Steve, if there's people who can't make it to either of the trials or are unsuccessful in getting into the squad this time, what can they do to try and make one of the squads in the future?
We've got a lot planned. So unfortunately, our site was supposed to be live this week, but it should be live today, latest tomorrow, with the registration for next week. And medical forms can be submitted from there. But we've got a lot planned for there. We've got a 4-point strategy in place for growing this game over the next few years. So this year you'll see more internationals, more trials going ahead, as well as we'll be setting up Utry hubs or para hubs around the country, linked with the transplant football clubs that are set up, and giving people opportunity to come and try transplant football, as well as walking football and futsal as well, and try and grow those pathways as well for transplant patients.
It's all a very exciting time, and Mark and Steve in particular have alluded to this throughout the podcast so far. But Mark, it's not just going to be a men's first team, is it? Tell us a bit more about your wider plans for the club.
Well, the wider plans would be obviously the men's first team, development squad, and then women as well. There's no reason why women and girls can't get involved. Youth set up, junior set up. We basically just want to provide opportunities for all ages, whether that be a 2-year age band or 3-year age band or whichever in the junior football. But we just want to make sure that if a transplant patient or referrer wants to play football, they've got an opportunity to play, and they've also got a peak to aim for as well.
And this one's for all of you. We'll start with Dan. What are your plans or aims, goals going forward for the England Transplant Football Club?
Well, I suppose a smaller aim is to establish this national team, get through the trials and then play some friendlies to actually get it up and running. I suppose a bigger ambition is to see if we get the FA to recognise this as an impairment-specific team, a para-football national team, and eventually maybe bring it under their wing so that it has the same sort of prestige as some of the other impairment groups, such as the cerebral palsy team or the visual impaired or blind teams that are running. So it'd be really to do that nationally and spread the word and raise awareness and get people like myself and Mark, who are county development officers, doing similar work so we can grow the game. So I think it's a fantastic initiative, and we should really just try and get on the back of this, really.
I completely agree with you. Mark, how about yourself?
That first friendly will be a success for me. That first England game. I think once we see that and that happens, it's 100% happening then.
That'll be a big moment for the club. And are we allowed to say who that's against, where it's going to be?
Yeah, I think they've already released it anyway.
I'll let you do the honours, Steve.
Well, following on what Dan said and what Mark's just said, really, like Dan highlighted about the growth of the game, after talking with the head of England FA, as a club and association that we're setting up, we were given a plan and a strategy to follow and adhere to, so that we can associate. And as a board, we've implemented a strategic plan now to go forward and actually make sure we hit all the core principles that the FA want to achieve with their England DNA. And we want to go above and beyond that and follow the guidance and the core elements from grassroots to elite level, really. And so that starts with us obviously reaching out from grassroots to the elite level and building these para hubs. And the start of these trials and the international coming up, which we just talked about then, is against Holland, and it's at Eindhoven Stadium. And it's on the 28th and the 29th. Well, the game's on the 28th of May. And hopefully we'll be taking 2 teams over there. So our development team and the first team men's team as well.
If that's something you like to get involved with and you like to play for your country in an international friendly, then make sure you check out all the details on the website, on the social media, and you could be involved. That is realistic. And Steve, we've talked about the team so far, but alongside the team, as well as the team, there's also going to be the England Transplant Football Association. Do you want to tell us a bit more about that and what the aim is?
Yeah, so the aim of the association, the board, we've put some specific people together that actually transplant patients who are involved, not 100%, enough of transplant patients who are involved now. And again, like I mentioned, we've got a strategic plan in place to set up an association through transplantfootball.com, so that it's an informative place to go for anything you want to get involved from grassroots to elite level. So it's not just about playing, but we're looking on our pathway to fund coaching, to get people back into coaching, to fund their lessons, to training, to get them out and get them active and involved in more hubs around the country, as well as just growing the game. From an association point of view, it wants to be there's no governing body out there, so it wants to be the go-to governing body for transplant football, and make sure that people have access to the game, to coaching, to funding. So if you can't set up a club and you want to set up a club, we're going to look at match funding to help you set up a club as well, to get you on a training course, to get you into the club, and also integrate you and get you linked with your local FA so that you can get you into a pan-disability league. So that is the main core principles of us, is to grow the game, grow the pathway, grow for players, for the coaches, and also provide funding to help them to get to that point where we have got grassroots players that we can pick from an elite international team. Would you agree with that, boys?
I think so, Steve. I think from my point of view, because there's nothing being delivered by the National FA, and we've been open and transparent with them about our plans for the future, and we've given them the opportunity to get on board, then I think that's the only way forward for you, really, because there is nobody else doing this sort of work. So you've got to drive it yourself, really.
It's a very exciting prospect and a thing that you're doing, something that I think lots of transplant patients around the country will benefit from. And me personally, as a massive football fan, someone who enjoys playing football, something that I can't wait to get involved with and hopefully make one of those teams. Steve, where can people go to follow the team online and keep up to date with the club's activities?
So you can go to transplantfootball.com. Everything will be on there. So the site will feature the men's team, the upcoming women's team. So there's a recruitment page on there if you're interested to join the women's teams. There's also going to be a development section where you can get involved for youth teams, as well as a local event that we might be putting on, like we mentioned, the hubs. So there'll be a timetable when we're putting the hubs on around the country, and some basic coaching courses as well. So if you want to get involved on the refereeing or the coaching side of it, we can get you set up that way as well and help you with funding or access to funding through the Football Foundation for your club.
There we go. I'll make sure I put all the links to the social media pages for the England Transplant Football Club and the Natter podcast in the show notes, as well as the website for the England Transplant Football Club. Thank you to Steve, to Mark, to Dan for coming on the podcast today. If you're enjoying the podcast, please make sure you share it with your friends, tell your family, shout it down the streets, whatever you want to do with it. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, that is the most used apps to listen to the podcast on. It will mean a massive amount to me if you go on there and rate the podcast 5 stars, as it really does help people discover the podcast more than you'd imagine. It boosts it up in the search listings. If you don't think it's 5 stars, fair enough. You're entitled to your opinion. I'd rather you told me that it's not, and then I can do what needs to be done to change it and make it better for you. If you leave a review along with your 5-star rating on Apple Podcasts, then all reviews will be read out in this section of the podcast. Thank you once again to my guests today, Steve Woodrow, Mark Horlick, and Dan Landstrom. I know Steve, I think we've discussed already, will be coming back in the future to do a regular episode about his transplant story as a kidney transplant recipient, sport in his life, and we'll probably talk more about this as well. But for now, I've been Lewis Daniels, and you've been listening to Transplants Take on Sport.